We're cool because we don't like things everyone else likes. Welcome to the Tabletop Shop.
Hello and welcome back to the Tabletop Shop podcast. Today we forge our legacy and financial destiny in Carnegie's America, followed by some popular games that just shouldn't be popular. I'm one of your co-hosts, Nate Clark, and as always, seated across the country from me is your other co-host, Mr. Cody Pennington.
You know, I just realized you must write down your intros, don't you? Beforehand.
Nah, it's 100% off the top of my head.
Well, it's just that, we had to redo this, and so the words are eerily similar to the first one, unless you just have really good memory.
I just go to bed rehearsing it the night before,
Yeah. Classic. Nate, what's up, bro? Good to be here.
It's good to be here. It's good to be here. Yeah, it is. I feel like I've got my radio voice on today.
Hey.
I don't know why. Maybe I've had too much coffee. I don't know what it is.
I haven't had any coffee. I'm sad. Although I am going to get brunch later, so maybe I'll get some then.
Good brunch spot, bad brunch spot.
I've never been there. It's a coffee place, but apparently they have brunch. So take that as you will. Hey, Nate, I know you always start with the question, and I'm excited to hear that question. But I just want to let you know that after that question, I have a board game-related World War II story to tell you.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, Cody, then question for you. What is the most disappointing upgrade you've ever bought for a game?
Oh.
Because I know you do upgrades a lot more than I do, and I know not all of them have been hits.
Yeah, I haven't got any upgrades in a long time, though. I mean, I did it a few times. Probably, I've gotten multiple brass upgrades.
Right, yeah.
And it was like the first round, the resources were very crappy. They looked really good, like in the pictures, and then they were just kind of, I don't know, dumb, weird little plasticky barrel things. And then it was like the iron and the coal was just like shiny yellow for the iron.
Shiny yellow?
It was just kind of like, yeah, sort of like an off yellow, like a warmer yellow, not quite an orange, but it just didn't look very good, and I was sad. So I got an even better set. I think that was off of, what's it called? Top Shelf Gamer, something like that. Normally they have some good stuff. There's just a collection of board game upgrades. So I ended up going with Etsy instead, and I got some better items. 3D printed. So
that's weird because I don't think I ever played with those original resources you're talking about, but I have played with the fancy upgraded ones you have that are like metal and painted and all that.
Yeah. I don't even remember where I got those ones. Those might have been Etsy, but I know all the pieces, like the trains and the steamboats, those were 3D printed and those were Etsy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you? Have you gotten any upgrades?
I don't.
Oh, no, of course you have. I know you have.
Not too much. What do you mean, of course I have? What do you think?
I was just thinking Dune Imperium, you really decked out with a lot of stuff.
Yeah, but I didn't source like third-party upgrades. Like I bought the deluxe, or I got it as a gift, but the deluxe box that comes with all the minis and the insert and all that stuff.
Oh, okay.
So that comes with a bunch of minis, and then my wife painted it. So I guess I don't know if I'd call that an upgrade, though. I feel like to me an upgrade is something you seek out and buy. So then I guess I did by acquiring the deluxe box. I guess that was like a very intense upgrade. But I've never bought upgraded bits or workers or anything. I know you bought the different workers for Underwater Cities. Also, you bought some like little submarine guys instead of stupid
and that's
doors.
necessary because the original is just a dumb piece of cardboard that looks like an elevator door. What is this?
It's quite possibly the worst idea ever for like a worker placement spot. Your worker is a cardboard token that has a picture of a door on it.
Yeah. Like, what are you doing? What is it?
I'm going to go visit
and the game doesn't even
room
explain.
Over here.
I don't know. Maybe I'll have to go back and look in the rulebook and see what they call it. If it's just like
because they can't. There's no way they call it workers, right?
Yeah.
That's just.
It can't.
That'd be rude.
And you can't call them meeples anymore. It's definitely not a meeple. Anyway.
Cody, what's your World War II board game story?
Yes. Well, you know that I have a World War II channel, and I become a student, an extra student of World War II, and I have been listening to an audiobook about Admiral Nimitz. And Admiral Nimitz is a very interesting fellow. Do you know who Admiral Nimitz is? Just making sure.
Not from A-Push or any of my classes, only from what you've told
Okay.
me, which is very strange knowledge.
Yeah, well, I mean, I like to give you the random strange knowledge
Exactly.
because that's what makes history real, man. Admiral Nimitz was the American naval commander of the Pacific Theater. That's what he did. Was his thing. So he was organizing the fight against them Japs, and he was a unique leader in that he was very, very calm and quiet, never got upset, wasn't an angry fellow, but he was also a bit competitive, and he liked a good game of cribbage. So board game history there for you. He liked cribbage. And an officer joined his staff early on in the war, and this officer had developed his own good game of cribbage. So it became routine that when this staff officer and Nimitz would like fly out to a Pacific Island base to like oversee it and set up, they would play cribbage on the very long ocean flights that they would do. Because, they didn't have jets back then, at least not quite yet.
And
so
they
the
didn't have
flights were long.
iPads either. So
They didn't have iPads. Yeah, they just had to play cribbage,
so
dang
what
it.
are you going to do?
And now I've played cribbage before, but it's been a long time. I don't really remember how it works, but I know it's a point-based game. And they had this ongoing deal where it was a penny a point. So if you got 10 points, the other person had to pay you 10 cents. And on one particular flight, the luck was so against Nimitz that this other staff officer won every single game, and Nimitz ended up owing him $4 at the end. So sometime after this escapade, Nimitz was admiring a fancy pocket knife that this officer had. I'm sorry that I keep saying officer. I don't remember who the guy is, which is sad since I literally just studied it. But anyway, and Nimitz was like, this is a cool knife. And the officer insisted that he keep it. And when Nimitz was offered to pay for it, the officer just said, don't worry about it. I'll just win the earnings back in our next game of cribbage. And Nimitz just stares at him deadpan and says, get the hell out of my office.
Wow, okay. Doesn't sound like somebody that's fun to play games with, actually.
Well, I mean, if you and I were playing a game on like an 8-hour flight and one of us won every single game.
Well, you didn't say every single game. You said he won one game by a lot.
No, I did I? I meant that he
Yeah.
won like every single game throughout the
Oh,
entire
that's pretty
thing.
brutal.
Yeah. So got a nice earnings there.
It's funny. It makes me feel like it's like a Professor Xavier and Magneto thing where they like came together and played chess.
Yeah. But I guess you can't get points in chess though. So what's the wager? Like, just give me $10 if I win?
No, like every piece you knock out of the other person's maybe, because then you can like
Ooh.
win the match, but actually come out. No, because then that kind of ruins the game. Then you have to think differently.
That'd be
So
interesting.
Maybe that's not a great way.
Yeah.
Speaking of games, Cody, what'd you play this week? Did you play Cribbage?
I did not play cribbage, unfortunately. Hey, maybe next time we hang out, that cribbage can be the game that we really want to
I've
play.
played a handful. I feel like for classic card games, I feel like Pinochle is your thing. For me, it's Cribbage. I've played a lot of Cribbage.
So you are a master of the cribbage then.
Nope. No, I doubt I've ever won.
All right, well, it's been not quite this last week, but like the last 2 weeks, I think. I played Red Cathedral, which is a game I saw. I was like, that looks kind of interesting. And then I looked at it. I'm like, this looks actually kind of dumb. And then I was
Really?
asking you for recommendations for games, which is kind of funny since you hadn't played this game. But I was just trying to find games that were like small but had a lot going on with them. And you were like, Red Cathedral. I was like, I'll look at it again. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll buy it. It's pretty cheap. And I played it. And Red Cathedral it has this rondel type board, which is how you acquire resources. Those resources you then put into building towers of a cathedral, the Red Cathedral, if you will, because this is Russian. And you get points at the end for contributing the most to certain cathedrals, or it's one cathedral, to certain towers. And it has a weird scoring system for how many points you get based off of how much you put in there. And that's the game. There's some stuff going on, but that's basically the game. And I didn't mind it. It was pretty fun. I'm going to keep it. But my main complaint was my perception of it after was this is a game that is a bit too clever for its own good. In the sense that there's like 4 rules for every single rule that there should be. It's like, it's a bit too complicated for what it is. And I think the example I gave when I was telling you about this last time, because obviously this is, I already told you a little bit about this. I should have just saved it for the podcast.
You're ruining everything.
I know. But the scoring system for the towers, there's like 4 towers or more, depending on how many players you're playing with. And first you got to go, how many points is this tower going to be? You have to figure out how many completed sections are in the tower. That's 2 points per that. And then you add 1 point per ornamentation that each player has added to that tower. Then after that point, that's your total. Then you figure out who contributed the most. So who has the most tokens on that tower? Now that player gets all the total points, but then the second player gets a third of those points rounded down. But if you're playing with more than 2 players, it's like first player gets all, second player gets half of those points rounded down, third player gets half of those points rounded down. It's like, it kind of makes sense. I see what they're going for, but the whole game was kind of like that, where there's just too many rules all over the place. It's not so complicated a game that you can't keep those memorized, even like when you pull it out and play it again a month later. But it was, I don't know. I was hoping for a more streamlined experience, you know?
Yeah, that was what I was just thinking. It sounds like they figured out mathematically maybe how to like really balance the game. But maybe it needs a little less balance and a little more streamlining, if that's what the trade-off has to be.
I think so. I'm not going to get rid of the game, but I would be very intrigued if there was like a second edition for this that came out in 5 years or something.
Well, there is an expansion that gets a lot of love. I don't know if it's the sort of expansion that fixes that, or if it maybe, in your opinion, might actually make it worse. I'm not sure.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. But the other game I played is a game that you know because you taught me. It's Scout. Scout was a game. It was like a year and a half ago. It was getting a whole bunch of buzz. It was very popular. And because it was so popular, I kept looking it up. And then I, it's a little cover of like a circus tent. Then you click on the BGG images. It's just a bunch of weird abstract numerical cards. And I was like, what is this? This looks really dumb. I don't want this anymore.
Yeah, let's be frank here. You've bad-mouthed it quite a few times.
I have, because it looks really lame. And then I played it, and it's actually pretty good. It's pretty good. Because here's the thing. When I want to get a board game, I want to get a game that is like, it's a tabletop game. It's a board game. Right. Yeah. Not like, this is one of the games that feels like it would have come out in the early 2000s, where you've got a bunch of like Phase 10 and what are some of these? Like Skipbo. Certain games like that are, you wouldn't really consider them a board game. And I wouldn't really consider this in the realm of your standard board games, but I think it was a really good implementation of a quick playing strategy trick-taking card game, and I enjoyed it.
Now, which version did you get? Did you get the one I have, or did you get the original in the box?
I got the one you had because it was literally like half the price. And
it is. Yeah, it's
like
crazy.
All I could tell was the big version just comes with like tokens or something for like tracking points, I guess.
That's the only difference. It's crazy.
I don't want to pay like $25 for that. That's dumb.
I know, it's crazy. But yeah, I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, me too. It should get here soon, and then I will play it.
Sweet.
What have you been playing, broski?
Okay, so I finally played an expansion that I've had for a while, but I didn't have the game with me, so I just didn't play the expansion. This is the Gods
I thought you were going to say it's an expansion you've had for a while, but you never had the game. I was like, what?
So there's a pretty increased incentive to acquire the game. No, this is Gods of Asgard expansion for Blood Rage, which is essentially just a little bit of spice to Blood Rage, where there's a couple of provinces will be given a random rule that will affect combat. It might be something like, all the cards that are played are revealed one by one face up, or instead of the highest strength, actually the lowest strength wins the fight in this province. So they're kind of game-breaking things, but it's just for one province, and then they'll kind of jump around to different provinces over the course of the game. I think it's definitely not a necessary expansion, unless it's a game that you're tabling a lot, because then it adds in a little more excitement, a little bit something new. Whereas if it's a game that you just bust out every once in a while, this is in no way needed, because it's trying to add variety, I think, for people that play the game often. So I think it's a fine expansion. I just don't know how often I'll use it, because unless I had people I was consistently playing Blood Rage with, I feel like it's not really necessary.
Yeah.
Also, I have to say, upon playing Blood Rage again, I know that you were kind of saying you'd like to give it another shot, give it another chance. Upon playing it 2 more times in the past week, I can confidently say that I really don't think you would like this. I kind of had an epiphany about Blood Rage, which is that the game is really best when people are getting mad. Like, I think that's the point of the game, is to make people angry, because you can control so much in the game. In a way, it's so deterministic and so Euro-y. Like, you take actions, you put workers on the board, there's strength that can be calculated and totaled. And then after all of that, whenever you have a fight, each person picks a card from their hand and plays it at the same time. And these cards do wild things that like totally disrupt everything that you thought was happening, you know? And so it kind of takes like this very orderly, structured game, and with one card flip, kind of flips it on its head. But it's not totally random, like you're just flipping a card from the top of the deck. I mean, you're drafting cards, you know some of the cards that have gone into other people's hands. If you've played the game a few times, you know what cards are in the game. But still, man, when you play a certain card on somebody and they were banking on a win, and so those are the great moments of the game, which is why I think this is a game that just will never vibe with you, because I don't think that that's what you want.
Yeah. I'm more on the solo gamer side.
Right,
I mean, I don't mind some interaction, but when the whole game is just frustration and like that, it's like, nah, I'm good.
Well, it's something that might be more up your alley is Revive. Played Revive a couple times. The first time I played it, we played a rule very, very wrong, which ruined the game. We realized about halfway through that the game felt just too easy. And then I realized we'd been interpreting, there's like 3 main actions in the game, and I realized we'd been interpreting the cost of one of those actions as a benefit. That completely broke the game. I don't know how I did that. I mean, to be fair, the iconography wasn't fantastic for that specific action, but essentially Revive is...
It's like playing Scythe and being like, okay, so if I deploy a mech, I get 4 metal. Awesome.
It's literally to that level of game breaking, yes. And so you can imagine the ramifications that has on every aspect of the game. So, and it just wasn't fun, you know, because there's no tightness. And so it was just, it felt broken because it was. And then I realized we were playing it wrong. So we played it again and had a lot more fun the second time.
Okay.
Essentially in Revive, you're trying to revive the post-apocalyptic world. There's some tile flipping out in the central board, and you place some little houses out there and some little people that you can explore with and populate, I guess, is really the term. But essentially what it is kind of you have a huge player board with a bunch of discs on it, and those discs represent 3 tracks that all kind of link with each other at different points. And so as you advance along those tracks, you're taking discs off and unlocking abilities, and sometimes you need 2 tracks to cross a certain spot to unlock an ability. So it has this cool thing where you kind of need to invest in the different tracks, not equally, because you're not going to get to the end of all of them, but you know, it rewards you for not just investing in one track, because if you invest in a couple, you'll unlock more abilities because they're linked.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. And then it's got a cool card system where you're tucking cards into different sides of your mat. And so depending on which side of the mat you tuck your card into, you get either the top or the bottom ability of the card. So it's got a couple cool, clever mechanisms built around some pretty basic Euro-y type things. Even on your player board, you've got a little tech tree, and there's a bunch of different factions and all that. I'm looking forward to playing it again. I've definitely had fun with it. I don't know if it's a game I'll ever love, but I do definitely appreciate the design and want to play it some more.
Okay, cool.
And then played Welcome to the Moon, which is... I was actually surprised by how much I liked it, because I don't like Welcome 2. I've played the original, and I don't like that one, but I was still interested in this one because this one has 8 different maps that increase in complexity. And essentially it's another draw or a flip and write, where you're flipping 3 cards from 3 stacks. And then when you flip them over, you get a number on the card you flipped, and then the card that's next on the stack will have a symbol, because the backs of the cards all have a symbol. So with you're going to flip 3 cards, and so you'll have 3 pairs of numbers and symbols, and then you have to pick which one of those pairs to use. You apply it to your board, and there's a lot of different ways to use those symbols, and it depends on which map you're playing with too. The first map is very simple. The second one is very strange, a much more obtuse way of addressing the system. So pretty cool. Like I said, I didn't enjoy the original Welcome to, but this one feels like it has a lot of replayability with all those maps. So the only thing I'm not too happy about is that it is dry erase, which feels kind of cheap,
Ah.
but also they have 8 different maps. And so if you want to make it replayable with 8 different maps for 4 people many times, it's like that's really your only choice, I guess. So.
That's why Rolling Realms has always looked kind of uninteresting to me. Is the
Oh, is that dry erase
aspect.
also?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so.
Yeah. Like from a replayability perspective, it makes sense, you know? And if you're just making something like Three Sisters or Cartographers, it's like, okay, you have one map, they're double-sided, so put 120 or 150 sheets in there and you're good, right?
Yeah.
But this is like, okay, you want to play with 4 people and there's 8 different maps. It's like that's a lot of paper.
It's a lot of printing.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean that's going to
true.
increase the production cost for sure, because the box is going to be bigger and heavier. Not to mention it's probably more expensive to produce all of that than just some reusable sheets. So
Yeah.
I understand it.
I'll get
And
around to
then-
getting it someday.
I like it. We'll see. We'll see how it as it progresses as we play more maps. But and then of course with you we played Ezra and Nehemiah. We played
Yeah, boy.
Acropolis and we played Carnegie. I'm
Yeah,
pretty
boy.
sure these are all going to be upcoming games of the weeks. I know one of them is because it's today. So I'm just gonna as a blanket statement, I enjoyed all the games. You'll
All right.
hear what I have to say about them in future episodes and also this episode.
Ooh. Don't leave me hanging, man.
So let's go talk about our game of the week, Carnegie.
All right. True to the words that Nate spoke just a few moments ago, our game of the week is Carnegie. Although maybe you didn't specify we're talking about Carnegie. You just
said
knew it was a 1 in
Carnegie.
3 chance. You did? Okay.
I did. Yeah.
True to the fact that I forgot what you said just a few moments ago. I suppose it falls to me since I have now played. How many times have I played Carnegie, Nate? Was that my
5.
4th game? No.
I think that was your 5th game.
That's right. I think we played. No. I think that was my 4th because I think the 3rd game was the practice game I played before, or the relearning
okay.
game.
That doesn't.
I feel like I should pull Carnegie up here. Carnegie is it's a different game. So it's by Xavier Georges, who also worked on Black Angel. Although
Yeah,
Black
baby.
Angel had like 3 designers, which is kind of confusing. So there's some cool stuff coming from this guy. Carnegie is currently ranked 107 on BGG. I'm going to give my hand away a little bit. I really like this game, and I hope that it gets into the top 100. I feel like it deserves that space. But what is Carnegie, you ask? Carnegie is a themed game from the age of Carnegie. So this would be like the mid to late 1800s. And Carnegie's expanding his little industrial empire thing because he was that steel man. And he was also well known for being a philanthropist. So giving donations to various good causes. Those donations form your competitive objectives during the game, which is kind of cool. So you have to pay to make a donation to claim an objective. So kind of like, doesn't Terraforming Mars have that function in the, I forget what they're called, not the achievements.
No, yeah, absolutely. There's the milestones and there's the awards that both function a little differently, but they're both competitive. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of like that. It's definitely its own system. But there's so many parts of the game. So that's part of the game. Part of that big main board is this whole networking aspect where you're trying to connect 4 different regions of the United States and you're trying to improve your travel value in each of those regions. So you're trying to get it all the way from stagecoach up to traveling by train. And depending on which of those regions you have connected, based off of your lowest common denominator of travel, that earns you points. So it's kind of this cool system you're working with, but you can also block other people if they're trying to go somewhere. And then on top of that, you have your own little player board where you're trying to maximize your efficiency with these department tiles that you can put workers on, and you can move these workers around between different department tiles and send them on missions to do things, to earn income, to earn points, to set you up for future turns. And all of this is dictated by the very cool action selection mechanism board system thing. So this is a little board that can be randomized each game. I say board, it's just like a few pieces that you sort of click together and make a little custom board each game that has 4 different action types. Those are the only 4 actions you'll be taking throughout the game. And it'll be too long to try to explain every single thing, but there's just 4 different aspects of how you can manipulate the game. And then each of those pieces moves along a track that triggers events. So on your turn, you get to select the action that everybody will do for the turn. So maybe you're going to try selecting something that maybe it's not super strong for you, but you know no one else is set up for that action this turn, so you can take that action. And then that will also trigger an event that occurs from the board. It's just this cool little puzzle that affects everything else. And I'm not particularly reminded of any other game that has a system like that. Can you think of any other functions in games where one player selects the action for everybody? I guess besides like Ares Expedition or
Yeah, I was thinking Race for the Galaxy kind of, but
sure.
but
that is something where everybody can collectively choose turns to take.
yeah. Yeah, because you're picking one for yourself. So every single round you have some control over what you're going to be doing in the round.
Sure. So
Yeah.
similar but a little bit different. And that is basically Carnegie. If I say any more, we got to start getting into the likes and dislikes. Anything you want to add, Nate?
Nothing I want to add to your overview. No, I think it was perfectly comprehensive. Let's talk about something that I don't think you really mentioned actually in your overview, which are the player boards themselves.
Sure.
When we first sat down, actually even before that, when I saw like a video or picture or whatever, looking at those player boards, I thought they were kind of gimmicky because essentially what they are is they're not really dual layered, but inside of the player boards, you can pull out these tracks. And so they all start basically all the way in, not quite, but they basically start all the way in. And then over the course of the game, you can basically upgrade them, which is more or less just moving on a track, but you're pulling the track out of your player board so it reveals more options.
Yeah.
At first, I thought that was really gimmicky and kind of silly. And then I thought about it more after playing the game, and I realized, you know what? It's actually really clever for a couple of reasons. One is that this really saves on the footprint of the game because you have like these every player has these 4 tracks, which would be like another second player board next to your player board. And instead, they've chosen to put it inside of your player board because you don't need most of that information for most of the game, right? So it's actually, instead of everyone having 2 player boards, everyone has one with some extending, components from it. So I thought that was actually pretty smart. But then on top of that, it also kind of saves a little bit of setup time because also if you had 4 tracks out, you'd have to like populate them all with discs. Which would just be more basically, actually, I feel what I'm realizing is I'm kind of describing Revive right now, which I just talked about. Huh. Revive has an enormous player board, and you have to put out like 20 some odd, like 25 discs or something as part of the setup, like on different spots all over the place, And so this game, for both of those reasons I mentioned, I find the player board to actually be pretty ingenuitive. So I like that a lot.
Yeah. I've been really trying to remember the game. It's the other ocean-themed game. It's not Abyss that you had, and then did you like sell to me? And then I sold again. Aquatica. Yeah, I knew it was another A game. That almost has a similar reverse idea where you can tuck those cards inside the board and they slowly move inward as you use them. So I was kind of thinking of that, but this is cooler for sure. And so you don't have to like fully pull out each of those little sliders. On the right side of them that's always visible, there is a little representation of what all the spaces will be, so that's kind of cool too.
Yeah, so it's more efficient. Actually all of the information is visible at the very tip of the track, so which is very important for that game.
So is that your first like?
Locking it in, man. That's the first one.
I accept it. My first like is what I was already kind of gushing over, which is that brilliant action choice mechanism. For one, I like how it can be different for every game, which is really just the events, the order of events that will trigger is kind of different each game. But I love the fact that on your turn, whoever is the current player or the first player, they will determine what everyone else will be doing. And this is probably a different dynamic in a 2-player game versus a 3 or 4-player game, because in a 2-player game, you might have a pretty good idea of what someone wants to do on their next turn. So you might try to manipulate it a little bit and do something that maybe isn't quite optimal for both of you, so that the second player will do something that sets you up for an even better turn later. So that will probably get more tricky in a 3 or 4 player game. Maybe you will be less able to anticipate what it's going to be after another 3 or 4 turns. But I still thought that was really cool. I like how it's paired with an event, so you have to not only be ready for a given type of action, but you also have to be ready for the event that it's going to trigger. Maybe the event that's being triggered is a donation. You have to have money to make a donation. So if someone chooses that spot, even if the action is pretty good, if you don't have any money to claim a donation, which can be pretty important, especially late in the game, because that's how you get a lot of points, that can be hard. And I love that the game encourages you to not necessarily pick the action that's best for you, but to see if there's something that would actually just be bad for everyone else because they're not ready for it, and then pick that action. It's brutal. That's some good interaction right there. I know normally I'm not as keen on like really aggressively messing with people, but I think that's a good, solid implementation.
Yeah, I think, especially if you think about it from the perspective that, I mean, what, you're only going to get 20 actions over the course of the game?
20 rounds.
Yeah, so to miss one of them almost entirely, like, you know, to perform on one of those actions very poorly, or to basically miss it altogether, which happened to me a couple times, you know, when we played, is pretty brutal. And when you put it into perspective, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's really painful when, you know, somebody's like, well, you know, I'm taking this action, and you look at your player board and you're like, I have no workers on that action. I can't do it. And it's 100% your fault. And the other person just noticed and they took advantage of it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I know you were a bit frustrated from your first game, and I would be too. But does that make you want to play it a second time, try to do better?
I mean, yeah, of course, that's something that an experienced player is going to obviously have the upper hand, because they understand the cycle a little bit more of workers, which is something I also want to talk about here.
Ooh.
The life cycle of workers is very interesting in this game, where, you know, you start with some on your player board, and then some of your actions will force you to put them on the actual game board in these different income areas, depending on which area of the United States you send them to, which is good because you need them out there to generate income. You know, every single round, one of those areas of the United States is going to get triggered, and you can pull a guy off the board to trigger income there. So you want guys on the board to do that, but you also need guys on your player board to actually perform actions. And so you kind of want guys in both spots, both on your player board and on the game board. But, you know, then there's lots of different spots on your player board, and there's lots of different spots on the game board. And so your workers are just kind of cycling through those two things. It actually reminds me of Arborea. I told you this when we played. It reminds me of Arborea very similarly, where you're thinking multiple moves ahead, and you're putting workers out, but you're not going to get them back for a little while. And you have some control over when you'll get them back, but not 100% control. And so it's kind of like just what workers you have doing what, and don't get too one-sided with it, you know? Because if all your workers are on your player board, you can do any action probably, and maybe to good strength, but you're going to completely be getting no income whatsoever, you know? And vice versa. So I think that's something that, you know, with consecutive plays becomes more and more fun, probably because you can really master it. Yeah,
it's definitely a different sort of engine that you have to study and learn. My second like is essentially the same thing. I love the balancing act of this game. And I like how you called it the life cycle of the worker. That's actually like a perfect description of how it works, because the little worker starts off in the measly lobby, and then he gets moved to an assignment, and then he gets sent out onto the board, and then he returns and restarts as a lowly little worker in the lobby. It's pretty fun. Mm-hmm. And that balancing act, it really can be a little bit frustrating, but satisfying if you work it out well. Because like one of the actions, one of the 4 types of actions you'll take is the HR action. And that's what lets you send your workers around on your board and take certain movements to get them to the places you need them to be. Well, one of the departments is the HR department. If you assign more workers to it, you'll have more moves you can do on a future turn. So early on in the game, I think you start off with 2 workers on that spot. You're like, I don't really need workers. Like, I just move some guys off, and I want to get them to where they need to go. But then after like 2 turns, they've been used up, they've been sent out, they've come back, and now you have all these workers useless in your lobby, and you move the workers off of the HR board that will let you move them in the first place. So you're like, oh, good, I can make like 3 movements, and that does nothing for me. So it it can really burn you if you're not sure what you're doing, especially when you're doing what you were doing, Nate, which is where you didn't realize that you get 3 movements per HR guy and not 2. Sucks.
Yeah, that was a little bit rough, but I don't think I was going to win the game anyway, so it wasn't crippling in that sense.
Might as well get as low a score as possible,
There you go.
so your second game will just be this huge PR, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so similarly on the same topic, still talking about workers and whatnot, I really like the system of triggering income. So it happens in, depending on which action you take on the action selection board, it'll trigger one of the 4 geographical areas of the United States. And then each of those 4 areas has a little track. And if you have a worker there, you can pull the worker off, put him back in your lobby, and then you get to take income. And you'll get income based on how far you've moved on the track for that geographical area, plus any discs you've removed from those things you pull out of your player board. So basically, when you're building cities, you're taking more discs off your board, and all of those discs are going to give you income. I like that system because, again, it involves the balancing act of the workers. It also means there's 4 different tracks on the player board that you kind of need to decide how you want to invest in them for income purposes, but also for scoring purposes at the end of the game. And then additionally, taking pieces off your board to increase your income is also a really satisfying thing. And so all of those things jumbled together to create this kind of like ultra income turn whenever you can trigger it, which makes it even more painful when you don't have a worker in that section to pull off and trigger an income. So, and a lot of times that affects the decision you make, not just because every action on the action selection board has an action and a section that's going to get triggered. And so a lot of times that is also a very important factor that helps determine which action you're going to pick.
Yeah. Yeah, my third point is pretty similar, but more just the assertion that there's a lot of game smashed into this. Well, pretty good sized box. It's not a tiny box or anything. But you have the main board that has that income aspect that you're talking about with the workers on the missions, as well as all of the connection links, which is almost like a side quest in a way, but you'll get a lot of points for it at the end of the game. So you're trying to connect everything. And then you have your personal board, and that is its whole own engine with all moving the workers around to the different departments. And then you have the sliders on the right side. And then there's the action board with you're trying to predict what's going to come up in the next turn. And I love that there's all these different, very in-depth parts of the game, but kind of like you were saying, they all link together very well. If you do one thing somewhere, it's going to affect you in all the other places. And so you have to be prepared. You have to be planning. It can be a little bit of a brain burner if you're kind of going into it your first time playing, and even future turns or future games, it can still be a little bit of a brain burner, but it's a good kind of burn. You want to feel the burn. Know what I'm saying?
I can absolutely confirm that it was a brain burner. And it's the sort of game that while you're playing it the first time, you're like, I just have to play this more to really A, understand it, and B, do well at it,
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's what I liked about it so much. I like games that are different. Like you can pull out any number of worker placement games that you change up what the resources are, and maybe there's some sub mechanisms that make it a little more interesting, but it's still kind of a worker placement game, right? This is just different. I love that aspect of it. Maybe if there's another game that comes out or a few games that come out that implement it similarly, maybe it'll become less interesting. But this was just, it worked different parts of your brain. If you had previous gaming experience, it may not necessarily help you very much if you just haven't played the game before. You got to learn it.
Yeah. My last point is neutral. So if you have more to say,
all right,
take it.
Nope. I have some dislikes, but one of my dislikes is sort of neutral. So maybe we should do our neutrals, dude.
Okay, let's go for it. So my neutral point, let's start off by saying that the game board is kind of very dull disc placement that's not really rewarding. It's literally like, oh, okay, I'm going to build a city. I take a disc off my board. Cool, that'll be income later. And I just put it on a city. As long as there's an available spot and it matches the same where I'm taking the disc from, I just place it on the board, right? On top of that, the networking, which there is some networking for scoring purposes, is very basic. Like it's very there's no frills whatsoever. It's like bare bones, just connecting cities, and there's nothing there's nothing fancy about it. So all of that is just kind of basic, right? However, that whole platform provides a good way of having some conflict, kind of, or player interaction where you can cut people off, or you can take all the spots for buildings within a city, so the other person can't build there. So it still provides, a space for interacting with the other player in that way, as well as what really makes it interesting is that that it's divided into those 4 different areas that all have their own income. That I like a lot. And so while, placing discs and super basic networking, not that interesting, what they've added on top of it, I think is really good. So kind of neutral.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I kind of described the networking aspect as a bit of a side quest, and it does feel a little bit like that. Yeah, I think
there's some
there's
points
so much
in it though.
Yeah, there's some aspects. There's so much other game going on that it could potentially become a bit too much if there was a lot going on there. But I do think there could be some room to make it a little bit more interesting. Like maybe if you put a disc down, maybe there's bonuses attached to different cities that you get automatically. So maybe there's a bit more competition. I don't know, something like that. It'd be interesting if there was an expansion that implemented something like that.
Yeah, or give us a Europe map,
Ooh. Well, but then you'd have to have a whole new board.
And it can't be Carnegie either, so, it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
It's just a different
What would
game.
it be at that point? I don't know. It's British industrialist. Anyway, my neutral-ish point is sort of the production value. Most of the game is totally fine. In fact, having the cool double-layer boards, I agree. It almost seems like it'd be sort of a physical gimmick at first, but it actually is pretty cool. And I like the money tokens. I like the fact that it solved the paper money problem. I know Tom Vassell hates paper money in games. Well, this just makes a little token that looks like paper money. So it's perfect, right?
What do you mean it solved the paper money problem? Like, that's already been solved with plastic coins. Not plastic, cardboard coins.
So that you can have something that looks like dollar bills without it having to be like Monopoly.
But
basically.
They're super tiny, so they're just little cardboard pieces still.
I know, but they
not
look
really
like little wads of cash, so it's a bit more
barely.
thematic than just like a coin or something, Anyway, I like those. My main complaint is the wooden cubes, the standard resource thing. It's like everything else looks so cool. And granted, maybe the discs that you put down on cities is also a little bit uninteresting, but like a wooden cube, like give me something else. Give me some sort of molded or 3D printed or like some piece that looks cool. And I'm sure there's an upgrade out there that you can replace the cubes with, but it was a little bit underwhelming.
I'll follow that real quickly with a similar point. The cubes were almost shocking that they were just cubes. It's like, and you have goods, and these goods are little cubes.
Generic
and it's like,
goods.
What year is this? I'm sorry. So that was a little surprising. But then also on the player boards where you have the sections that pull out, if you look at the player board, there's little waves in them, almost like if you put 2 pieces of paper together with like just stick glue, it gets those little waves. It kind of resembled that in a way, which feels really cheap. Maybe it was unavoidable. I don't know. Those are minor things though. They don't affect gameplay or anything like that.
Sure.
So a real point for me, which is really my only negative. I have one other thing to mention, but
Okay.
I'm not a huge fan, and this might come across, I understand this, it might come across as somebody who's just played the game for the first time, and they were a bit overwhelmed, but I think I'm not a huge fan of the meeple movement on the player board, if only because it might overcomplicate things. There's already so much going on in the game that to add to that another layer of you have to use an action to move meeples around on your player board to get them to specific locations almost feels a little bit too much. And I understand. And again, I've only played the game once, and so obviously that aspect on top of everything else is overwhelming because there's an element of stress to it where like if I don't get my guys out 2 buildings, Cody's going to pick an action that I don't really benefit from, and so there's there is a little bit of irritation, I guess, that's feeding into this maybe a bit, but
Sure.
I'm not sure where I fall on this. I feel like maybe it's a little bit too much, but then also that's your fourth action. That whole HR thing, moving workers around, is the fourth, I guess, core. I'm kind of putting that in, air quotes, core action. And so I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I wouldn't say that I love it. It almost feels like something that would feel more appropriate in a not as complicated game. But I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really mind it, but I can see where you're coming from. Yeah, I'd be curious to see how you feel about it after another game or two.
Right, of course.
Yeah, put that down. Well, so is that your final dislike, basically?
Yeah, I have one other thing to mention, but yes.
Okay, cool. Well, I have a dislike and then sort of one other thing to mention. So it's the same. So my main dislike actually is the implementation of the neutral pieces for 2 and 3 player games. Not that I played a 3-player game. I know you just put less pieces down that are neutral versus a 2-player game. But what you do at the start to add a little bit more angst in the networking is you reveal some cards that randomly set up these neutral pieces that will go out and cover some of the donations, which are the competitive objectives. So those will not be acquirable at all for the whole game. And they will fill in some of the networking spaces. So, it kind of recreates what would happen if more people were involved, for sure, except for the fact that if you're starting a 4-player game, you don't know where everyone's going to go. So, with the neutral pieces covering, let's say, like the 2 points per the purple city building things from your player board. I forget what they're called. They're like industrial things. Well, now there's no point in really trying to invest in that aspect of the game because you're not going to be able to get as many points from it. So it kind of changes the trajectory of the game a little bit. It's more predictable. The same as the networking. There's lots of little city spaces that if those get filled in, you can effectively get blocked from certain sides of the map. And I feel like every time I set up the game, just randomly using the cards, a lot of those single spaces get filled up, like in the left side of the board. So oftentimes the west gets kind of boxed out. And, I feel like it could have been implemented better or just differently. Maybe some way, like every round you flip over a new card and then fill in a few things. So that would have been my preference.
I'm not a huge fan of the spots being blocked on the map. I do, however, actually kind of like some donation spots being blocked because that essentially means it kind of gives you more direction and it kind of makes the game a little bit tighter instead of like, oh, okay, well, we have everything available and they're going to go for that, so I'm going to go for this, and we just won't really interact or compete over too much. Whereas if like, okay, well, that type of building is blocked and this type of whatever is blocked and that, now we just have less to work with as far as what we're going to, be scoring points on. The map thing could be worse because of the randomness, you could get boxed out of a section or a certain section could be really difficult to deal with. I think I like it okay with the donations. The problem is, what's the real solution? Is the real solution to make a 2-player sided map or a 2 to 3 player sided map? In theory, that could be the right option, but that's a lot of work, right? To create and balance in a whole nother map, right? Or kind of like what you mentioned, having something that happens progressively through the game that would also be difficult. And I would actually find that worse where it's like, oh, halfway through the game, all of a sudden that donation spot just got taken or that random city spot just got taken and that came out of nowhere, right? So that I think would be worse. And also it adds more like in-game maintenance, which I really hate. I hate playing with like a third kind of like ghost player that like kind of does things and you have to remember to flip their card and do their thing and how do their rules apply for them and all that kind of stuff. I really hate. So I don't know if there's a perfect solution, honestly.
Yeah, there may not be. And maybe they implemented different ways. Maybe they experimented and that's the best thing they came up with, which very well could be. But I'm still going to complain about it.
That's all right. You complain about it, man. You go for it. More power to you. Last thing for me is not even really a complaint. It's just kind of the learning curve. It's very steep. You're not going to grasp this whole thing in one game. And like I'm saying, it's not necessarily bad, but it doesn't make for a satisfying first play, right? However, it does promise future plays that will be progressively more and more satisfying and more fun. And so it's hard for me to say how much I like this game after one play. I can see what it's doing, and I can see that it's really just it's very creative and it's very interesting and it's even innovative. But I need to play it more to know if I actually like the game or not. You know what I'm saying? Like, it could be that I
Yeah.
play this once more and I'm like, yeah, okay, not my kind of game at all. Or I play it once more and I'm like, this game is just made for me, fantastic. But after one game, I cannot make that call. You know, it's really hard.
I'm looking this up now. If I recall, I thought, yeah, this is on Board Game Arena, homie.
Really?
So we could play a game of this.
Wow.
Get it going.
Okay. Well, there you go. That might solve my issue.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, well, my final thought, I almost don't really even agree with it now that I'm looking at it. So maybe I'll run it by you. I'll see what you think.
We'll talk about it.
I felt like even for a 2-player game, I thought there was a lot of downtime. And certainly there's a lot of things to be thinking about. So maybe you just spend that time really thinking and planning. But in the same way, even the person on their turn is like, oh man, what do I do? I got so many choices to make right here, because what you do will depend on what the person did before you. So maybe you kind of have to wait and see. And so I'm just thinking, like, in a 3 and even a 4-player game where you have to wait for 3 other people to make a decision, I feel like that could get really bogged down. But I mean, lots of games have that, and that's just kind of an aspect of a heavy game. Some heavy games just implement well downtime activities. So I don't know, what's your perspective on that facet?
Yeah, I didn't think about it too much because, it wasn't that pervasive in a 2-player game. There's a little bit, especially if it's an action you pick where I can't do anything. Maybe you pick an action where I'm not getting any income and I can't take the action, or basically can't.
Sad.
And so I just watch you play a whole turn and then I get to do a turn. But I don't know. I could definitely see that in a 4-player game it would be too much. I could see that this is a game I wouldn't want to play at 4. I would be interested to try it at 3 to see how the interaction, pans out. I wouldn't want to do it at 4. But I like the idea of picking an action at the beginning of the round so everybody knows what the action's going to be, and then you all do it one at a time. I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't be that bad, honestly. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be. Just have to see. But that's all I got. Those are my thoughts.
That's all I got.
What is your final verdict on the game of Carnegie, Nate?
I mean, I kind of already said it. My final verdict is that there is no final verdict yet.
Okay.
Like, I can see that it's really good design, and I could see that it might be a game I would like a lot, but I could also see that it might be a game that I just wouldn't really like that much. And so it has my curiosity piqued, which is funny to say after already playing it once. But it has my curiosity piqued as far as just, is this a game I'm going to actually really love? Or is it just going to be something that I respect, but maybe, don't like that much? Brass Birmingham kind of falls into that. I've played it a few times. I think it's a great design. I think it's a really, really great design. I respect it a lot, but I just don't like it that much. I just don't, it's not a game that I love. I just think I get a medium amount of enjoyment out of a game that I can see is a fantastic design. And so I don't know if Carnegie is the same way.
Sure. Yeah, I'm a bit more firm in my opinion of this game. I enjoyed it very much. I was very excited about it because it kind of came out of nowhere. Like, it was not on my radar at all, and I don't even remember how I saw it. I must have just been browsing like Game Nerds or something. I was like, what is this? And then it looked well reviewed. Yeah, had some good rankings. And I was not disappointed at all. I loved how different it was. It had a lot of cool implementations of different mechanisms, ideas. I will say, though, that after my 4th game, which we played, I'm almost just a little bit bored with it. And I played those 4 games in a pretty short amount of time. So I think maybe I'll just need to take a break, come back, play it again like 6 months or a year or something like that, and then see how it still plays. But it may not have a whole bunch of replay value if that's the case. But that's my only caveat.
Okay, a little foreboding.
Ooh. Dun-dun-dun.
Okay, we definitely need to hasten on here because this is turning into a
We'll go quick.
episode.
We'll go quick.
Yeah, we'll go
Nate,
quick through this.
Tell them about our banter.
Our banter well, I kind of said it wrong in the intro. I said for games that are popular that shouldn't be popular, but that's not actually what the list is, because that definitely is not how I feel. These are popular games that we don't like. That's not to say that I don't think they should be popular. I mean, every game on my list, I totally understand why it is popular, and I don't think that's bad, but I don't like any of them.
Sure. Yeah. That's basically me too. How did you organize your list?
My list is pretty simply just organized by how much I like the game, or I guess I should say how much I dislike the game. So I dislike my number one more than I dislike any of the other games on this list.
Okay.
However, as a qualifier, I mean, I think I had 10 total games that I was picking between. I kind of arbitrarily decided if I thought the game was currently popular or not, because you can't just use like a BGG ranking, because there's a handful of games, even in the top 100, that I would not call popular anymore. They just left such an impact and have such staying power and are regarded so highly that they're ranked really highly, but they're not necessarily popular still. I mean, nobody's talking about Voyages of Marco Polo anymore. You know, even if it's a fantastic game, it's not a popular game. So I kind of just like looked at the games that I thought were popular and then picked some that I really don't like.
Yeah. I went more with the BGG route, so roughly as you go from my number 5 to number 1, it increases in popularity.
Okay.
Still with the caveat of pairing it against how much I disliked it. And I thought the BGG ranking system was appropriate for this, because even if it's not currently popular anymore, it was popular enough at one point to earn a high spot. And so basically I'm pitting how much I enjoyed it against that game's ability to get to that rank.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But there wasn't really a numerical like calculation going into it. I just kind of, I free balled it. It's there. Got my 5 through 1. We should do this.
Okay, let's do it. Cody, lead us off.
All right. My number 5 is a game that I was quite disappointed by, that was very popular, very up in the air. It's currently ranked 373 at the time of recording, unless it changed because I wrote down the number yesterday. And
so not at the time of recording is what you're saying.
Yeah, okay. Maybe I need to check it again. Whatever. Let's say 373. And I don't actually know if it's still super popular. It may have just had a lot of buzz when it came out. And because of that, I bought the game. Then I played it and I was like, this is not interesting. And that game, Nate, controversially, is Flamecraft.
Wow,
Flamecraft, it's got a prominent, cute little theme, got a bunch of cute little anthropomorphic dragons doing their thing. It's very colorful, very fantastical and whimsical. And that's kind of all it is. The system itself, it's one of those games where your resources are 1, 2, 3, 4. Nothing differentiating them, that they just appear in equal amounts in different ways throughout the game. So there's not really any incentive to get one resource over the other than just random circumstance. To make things worse, there are 6 different resources. So if we always bring this back to like Heir of Kingdoms, there's 4 resources there. All of them basically do the same thing. Like you could substitute out wood for stone and change the theme, and like they function no differently other than like the name of a card or something. This is like that, but it adds 2 more resources, so it's even more boring. Flamecraft,
If you want Cody to hate your game, do that to it. Put in resources that do not function differently in any way other than that they are different colors. Cody
I want balance. I want balance, dang it. And by balance, I don't mean just make them all the same.
They are
thing.
balanced.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Okay, my number 5 is a game from 2021. And since you're doing rankings, I'll just mention mine to prove that they are not obsolete games. This is actually a game that I played pretty recently, and I never even mentioned it as like a new game I've played on the podcast because it didn't leave enough of an impression for me to waste time on it. This is Final Girl, actually. So this is a solo-only experience in which you are a girl in a typical horror film setting, and you're trying to survive and kill whoever the big bad is, as well as rescue some of the victims and whatnot. However, it's dice-based, which is fine. Like a game like this is from 2021. It's ranked 128. It's definitely popular. Dice-based game from 2021, perfectly fine with me because we've come a long way with dice, right? We can do a lot of fun things with dice. And yes, you're rolling the dice and you place them on different actions and whatnot, but I still found that there was too much luck of the roll in this. Like you can mitigate a little bit, but it's much more heavily dependent on what you roll than something like, Castles of Burgundy, for example.
Sure.
There's not Like, Castles of Burgundy, you have tons of workers if you want, and you can mitigate dice easily. Or Black Angel, you have 6-sided dice, but actually each number is twice on the die. So it's actually, you have much better odds of knowing what you're going to roll, that sort of thing. So this, I just felt like the dice were too punishing. And then on top of that, it's a solo-only game. So if you really want me to like it, it's got to be really captivating, because I don't really... I'm just kind of like dipping my toes into solo gaming. And so if it's not really interesting and really fun, there's no way I'm wasting time on it. So that's Final Girl. I wanted to like it. The production, fantastic. The experience, mediocre.
Mike DeLisio would be very sad, I think.
He would be. Good for him.
Yeah. All right. Well, my number 4, bumping up on the BGG ranking. For anybody who can, like, just off the top of their head know what game I'm saying based off of its rank, for one, you're not real, because you don't know, like, the numbers change. But maybe if you know, like, at the time of recording on August 17th, 9:48 a.m., that would be insane, yeah. Well, this is rank 199. This is an older game. When is this from? I'm sorry. Let me look this up again. I want you to include the tippy-tap, clack-clack right there.
Click, clack,
From 2008, Cosmic Encounter, a game that is well-renowned. Lots of people like it. I know Tom Vassell, isn't this like in his top 10? This was like his number 1 game for a while, I thought.
I'm confused. Is this your pick, Cosmic Encounter?
Yeah.
It's from like the 90s, dude, or the 80s. It's from 2008.
BGG has 2008, so maybe this is a reprint of it, because I thought it was older too.
No, it's
1977.
There you go, 77.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. But yeah, I'm looking at the 1977. This is definitely like the old version. Yeah, there's like a Moses guy with tentacle arms on the front. I don't know what's going on.
Accurate.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the game. This is a game that is all about negotiation. So you've already kind of lost me there. And I've only played this once, so I honestly don't recall it super well. It was probably like 4 or 5 years ago or something. But in the game, on your turn, you are the acting alien power, and you choose a place that you want to like go and attack. And so you're going to attack someone else, and you send off your little spaceships. But that person can then just like make alliances, and like everybody else can just gang up and send all their spaceships to the fight to help defend against you. And so I get that it's going to be an attrition style game where people slowly get worn out, and then maybe you are less likely to make alliances, and you don't know if someone's going to backstab you. But if that whole being like the whole purpose of the game is just like, nah, I'm good. I don't want it to be so unpredictable. Like, it's a game where the rules are basically just do what you want, make the alliances that you want. And so I like things that are more concrete and you know what's going to happen. Like, if I attack, I have a certain chance of winning. Not like I attack and then, oh, look, all the 3 other players are all going to gang up and now my turn was entirely wasted and I got annihilated.
Well, it's like, I guess it's a lot more about playing the people than playing the game. But I haven't played this one. I would really love to, just because, it's so highly regarded, even after so many years. But yeah, I mean, it's, I'm very interested to see if I would like this, because it is just a negotiation game. And I think I could really like that, but it's just, there's no way to know, until you've actually experienced it. So,
which is fascinating, since Cosmic Encounter Duel came out recently. So how does a negotiation game work between 2 people?
I guess
I know I got it for you, right? Have you played it yet?
No, I haven't played it yet. I kind of glancing through. Obviously, there's no negotiation per se, but
you
they
both
kind
just
of
agree to win, and then you're good.
They take the idea of negotiation and they contort it a little bit, I guess. But I haven't played it yet, so I can't really say exactly how it works. My number 4 is from 2011, so also decently old, but it's been not just reprinted, but given different editions since then. It's currently ranked 432. This is King of Tokyo. King of Tokyo, I just find to be a very disappointing experience. Essentially, again, maybe it's weird, because some of my favorite mechanisms involve dice. I love dice placement, like workers as dice drafting. Mm-hmm. I love that. This game is also dice-based, but it is just about rolling dice. Yahtzee style, right? So you roll them, then you can keep what you want, roll what's left, keep what you want, and then roll one more time, right? Okay, that's mitigating luck. Sure, but, I mean, come on. You're still getting screwed a lot of times here, right? And, I mean, sure, that's fine. That's what the game is. It's light, fun, But I just find it kind of mind numbing. And yeah, they have like cards that you can buy with power that do special things, but most of the time they're not that interesting. Or if you think they are, they're probably not going to come into play as often as you would want them to be. And I don't know. And then on top of that, it has player elimination, right? So like somebody could be out and then watching another 20 minutes or even more if the game's going on longer. So I'm not a huge fan. I do see why it's popular, and I think there's even a new version coming or already has come out called like King of Tokyo Origins, and then you have King of New York, and there's probably other versions that I'm not aware of. I get why people like it, but I'm not planning on ever liking it. So
Yeah, I've played it just once. That was a while ago. And it was like, okay. It was like, meh. I'd be willing to try it again just to see how it was, but yeah.
I think it's relatively forgettable, but I feel like, sure, maybe if you have kids or something, then okay, but I can't see like wanting to play this at a game night. It's just not for me.
Yeah. Well, powering through here, because we got to get through this, man. My number 3 is a game that is even more popular. It's rank 88 on the BGG. And when is this from? Let me look this up. 2012. So it's been around for a amount of time. Lords of Waterdeep. Which was a game that was like well renowned, and that's why I got it. It's worker placement. That's always a good sign. It's D&D themed. That's pretty fun too. And then it's like the box doesn't close all the way. It's like, what? Why is there a centimeter space when you put the top box lid on? That's already kind of weird. It's sort of like a cheap cardboard. You pull it open, you start playing it. There's some very weird shaped, kind of chintzy tokens that represent gold and or points, I guess. I don't know, it's been a while now. It's sort of wacky. And then you start playing, and the worker placement's fine, and it's cool how you can like get out new buildings out on the board. But the entire D&D aspect is going on a quest is the equivalent of go ahead and acquire some white and purple and orange cubes, and then you spend them. And look, you completed a quest, and you got some stuff for it. And like, that's the game.
That is the game, yeah.
And I didn't like it. It was okay, but I played it maybe twice, maybe 3 times, probably not 3 times, and then I sold it.
Yeah, I don't dislike the game as much as you. I think it's fine. I've also played with Scoundrels of Skullport, which is fun. It is literally cube collection contract fulfillment. However, I do like that there's a lot of different buildings that can be drafted and placed out on the board. So every game has a different set of buildings based on what people build. That I like. So the game experience is somewhat different each time.
True that.
All right, my number 3 is one of the first games I bought when I got into the hobby because I had no idea what I liked yet, and I quickly realized that this is not it. It is currently ranked number 27. This is Arkham Horror, the card game. I played all through the base game, and I understand who the game is for, but for me, it was just too punishing, too difficult. I didn't really enjoy the theme that much, and then it was cooperative on top of that, which I'm not a huge fan of. I don't automatically hate cooperative games, but that is going to make it a little bit harder for me to like it, and this just kind of missed in every single area. So again, as with all the games on this list, I understand why people like it, and I'm glad that people like it because it's probably a good design. It's just really not for me.
Yeah, I bought this from you, then I never played it, but I've played a few different Fantasy Flight games, and this is kind of their thing, is sort of overly complicated, lots of keywords, lots of key abilities, lots of things you have to memorize. It's very...
Well, that's kind of
it's a big mesh.
That's kind of an LCG thing anyways, is like, what was it? Legend of the Five Rings was the same way, or Android Netrunner's the same way. It's like, here's a game with a million different keywords, and you better just remember them because we're not gonna tell you what they do. So,
I mean, even playing Mysterium, which is, I like Mysterium. It's actually pretty fun, but it still implements that. There's a whole bunch of keywords, and you have to have all these different effects so you can trigger something. Anyway, yeah, I never played Arkham Horror, although I owned it for a short amount of time. My number 2. We're actually jumping up a little bit in rank here. We're going from 88 Lords of Waterdeep to 149 for this particular game. This is a very popular starter game, I would say. Very popular cooperative game. There's lots of different implementations of it, and I feel like every Black Friday I see a mini version of this in Weimar.
I know what it is.
I'm always tempted to spend the $10. Yeah, This is Pandemic, homie. And, you know, when I was first getting into the hobby, Pandemic was okay. Even then it was okay. And now I'm just like, you take the cubes off the city and then more cubes appear. And then you take the cubes off and then there's some more cubes and you're trying to move your guys around. And it's going to be the Alpha Gamer complex. And, oh, look, we won. All done.
Wasn't that fun?
Or, oh, dang, we lost. And there's a lot of Pandemic system games out there now. There's like the World of Warcraft one. There's a Star Wars, like Clone Wars one. I thought there's another one. Probably several others out there, I'm sure. And they're all just like the same thing of the board just gets populated with the bad guys and you have to remove them.
Yeah, there's a lot of different permutations of Pandemic. I actually owned Pandemic Fall of Rome because I found it for 50 cents at a thrift store. And I still never played it. I just sold it. Like I just kind of feel like, man, I kind of want to try this. It looks more interesting. The theme is cooler, and I still never played it. And I just got rid of it. So
that's sad.
But that's fantastic, Cody, because my number 2 is ranked 149. It's Pandemic. Hey, direct crossover.
Right. Look at that.
Yeah, everything you said and some more. It's just boring. I mean, it's honestly just boring. What I will say is I actually really want to try Pandemic Legacy because I have heard some really good things from people that did not like Pandemic at all, love Pandemic Legacy. I really want to try it. Like, I really, really want to try it. And so we'll see. It definitely has me intrigued because for people that hate the base game and to still love Pandemic Legacy, it must do some crazy things, man, honestly.
I forget that Pandemic Legacy is a thing, and I just added it back to my examine list. So maybe I'll do that.
And it's like, what is it? It's ranked like 2 now, or 3, or 4, or something. It's in the top 5 for sure.
Is it? Dang.
Yeah. So I mean,
there's
something to it, man, that we haven't experienced yet. That's for sure.
Legacy games, man. It's where it's at. Maybe we'll find out when we play one. All right. Well, my number 1. Here's the caveat. I don't actually dislike this game that much.
Wait a minute.
It's made number 1 because it is so high. And I'm just like, this should not be this high. This should be a flash in the pan. But it's still sitting there at number 4 on BGG, Arc Nova.
What? I know, Cody?
Yeah, man.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Brute.
Yeah, man. See, again, here's the thing. I don't dislike it that much. Like it's got some cool ideas to it. The whole it's been so long since I played. There's markers you move around and they have to like cross and do certain things. You get points for it, and it's got the Civilization A New Dawn. It has kind of that system for card development, which is cool. But for all the cool stuff, I just didn't enjoy it. Like it didn't seem that mind-bending to me or that incredible, that new. It just kind of took a bunch of other mechanisms that were already out there and kind of smashed them together and then put some very weird, somewhat photorealistic looking artwork on everything. And then it jumped up to number 4. And it's probably really only because it's number 4 that I'm this frustrated about it. Because if this was like number 237, I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. I respect that. But it's like, no, you do not deserve to be in the top 10.
I guess it depends on how you decide, how things should be ranked so highly. If it's just based off of pure enjoyment and fun, then I've got Arc Nova's back on this one because I love it. So,
all right.
I mean, it takes what Terraforming Mars does and it does it better. It takes what Civilization A New Dawn does and it does it better, and it just like creates it. Anyways, I like it a lot. You're wrong.
Sure. All right. Well, what's your number 1?
My number 1, I'm not sure if you've played, but I'm sure you'll still agree with me. This game is ranked in the almost 4,000, but I would still very much argue that it is popular. This is the only board game I've ever seen a billboard for while driving on the interstate. Okay. It's the only game I think that I've ever ranked given a 1 out of 10 rating on BGG. It's probably the only game on my list that I actually hate, Exploding Kittens. I cannot stand this game. Again, this is one of the first games I played when getting into the hobby, and I'm shocked I'm still in the hobby. I'll just say that after experiencing that towards, my very like fundamental growing stages, to experience something so terrible as this, the fact that I'm still in the hobby it surprises me to this day. Cody. Exploding Kittens is a terrible game. I'm not even going to describe it. Don't buy it. Don't play it. Literally play anything else. Have you played Exploding Kittens?
No, I have not. So is this similar at all to we didn't play test this at all?
No, it's not that.
No?
It's not that innate. See, that I'm okay with that game because it's like from the outset. I mean, in the name of the game, they're like, this is gonna be an insane experience, and you know that going into it. But Exploding Kittens is like you have a hand of cards, and you're playing cards onto a stack, and you're drawing cards, and then you pulled me into it. I'm not describing the game. I hate it. It's
all right.
terrible.
Sort of just to spite you. Now I want to play it. I want to see what it's like.
Don't play it, Cody. Don't do it.
Unless it will end my gaming career. Who knows?
It just feels like a fake game. Feels like a fake game.
Okay. Well, that was a good list.
That was a good list.
Got to pull up some games that we've never really talked about very much.
It's always good when a list does that, and yet we still had a direct crossover, which is we haven't done that in a while.
That's pretty crazy, man. Look at that number 2.
Pandemic sucks.
Take
man.
that, Pandemic. Although I'm still tempted to buy that little $10 was the North America version.
Is it
like
that
Pandemic
cheap?
and a mini experience. I feel like 10 or 15. I've seen it even at Bimart. Which means you can probably find it for cheaper.
Probably not worth it, dude. I would just wait and try Legacy, honestly.
Okay,
I think
maybe
that's
I'll
what I'll
do
do. I mean, I don't think I'll ever touch Pandemic again until I someday try Pandemic Legacy.
Let's see who tries it first. And remember, you are what you wish you weren't.
That reminds me of like Paul's whole monologue in one of his letters where he's like, I do what I don't want to do, and I do not do what I want to do.
Yeah.
Expecting you to just break out with some spiritual wisdom, Cody, here.
Yeah, man. No, it's true though, dude, because if you wished you weren't a thing, you have to be that thing in the first place. So it's technically true to say you are what you wish you weren't.